Our second meeting today for the Home American Rescue Plan funding that we received. It's pretty incredible. We're receiving almost $3 million that we have to use by September 2030, so we have a lot of time to use it as well. And we're really looking to put it to use the best possible way. And we really welcome any input, questions, or suggestions anybody has. And with that, I'll turn it over to Deb Smith to get things moving. Deb.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, everyone. My name is Deborah Smith. I'm the Director for the Department of Economic and Community Development. I'd like to introduce staff from that department. I have Veronica Fields. She's the Grant Administrator, and Dave Dieter, who is the Assistant Director. As the Mayor mentioned, the city received $2.9 million from Housing and Urban Development for home ARP funds to be used for eligible homeless activities. The City of Erie and our consultants, Mullen and Lonigan Associates, have been meeting with stakeholders to complete the homeless plan since the week of June 2022. Today we have with us Bill Wazaleski from M&L Associates to facilitate this public hearing. So I will turn it over to Bill.
Thanks, Deborah. Thanks, Mayor. We're going to go through a brief PowerPoint today that talks about the process of the home ARP planning that we did with the city, and just a little bit of facts about the funding resources, and then we'll open it up for comments. So as I said, our agenda for today, do you think I can click this off?
Let's see if we can get rid of that.
Yeah. Oh, he's going to do it. Okay, great. So our agenda for this evening, we're going to talk about what is home ARP. We're going to talk about allocation plan process to date. We're going to talk about the home ARP qualifying populations and needs identified by the stakeholders, and then finally the proposed home ARP budget based on those needs that we've heard during the process. So what is the Home American Rescue Plan? This is a subsection of the American Rescue Plan funds, the ARPA funds that the city has received. It's a combination of both home funds and emergency solutions funds. Nationwide, there's a $5 billion supplemental home fund allocation to participating jurisdictions such as the City of Erie. These are separate again from the city's ARPA allocations. And they are to be going to persons that are homeless or at risk of homeless. As Deborah said, the city's home ARP allocation is a one-time allocation of about $2.9 million, and the city has until March 31st, 2023 to submit its allocation plan. And finally, once the city receives these funds and gets an approval from HUD to expend these dollars, they will have until September 2030 to expend all these dollars on the eligible activities and qualifying population. So I wanted to take a second to kind of provide a little bit more detail related to the planning process, an overview of the planning process. So as Deborah said, we started this in June of 2022, and we conducted a total of 7 focus group sessions, which are targeted to the required stakeholders under the Home ARP allocation plan regulations. We also had a specific session related to needs with the continuum of care and the city's home team, which deal with homelessness. Both organizations deal with homelessness in the city. We also distributed an electronic survey to the local service providers to get their input on the wraparound supportive service needs of persons with homeless or who are at risk of homeless. And then most importantly, the city conducted a survey of people with lived experiences, either who are currently homeless or were formerly homeless. And we'll have a little bit more detail about that. So we did both stakeholder outreach, persons with lived experience, and then there was a required needs and gaps analysis, which is basically a review of the data provided to us by various agencies and by HUD and through census demographics to identify priority needs of the qualifying populations under home ARP. All these were used, again, all this input was used to help the city develop its home budget, a budget based on these priority needs and other resources available to the city. And so we'll talk a little bit more about the budget a little later on in the slideshow. So when we say home ARP qualifying populations, what exactly is that? And so in order to benefit from these dollars, you must meet one of these types of populations. You must be defined as homelessness, as defined by McKinney-Vento Homeless Assistance Act. You could be homeless as a result of fleeing or attempting to flee domestic violence, dating violence, sexual assault, stalking, or human trafficking as defined by the HUD Secretary. You could be at risk of homelessness as defined by McKinney-Vento, and that would be an example of that would be you're currently a renter or a homeowner, and you may miss a rental payment or a mortgage payment, and then you become evicted from your house. You're now become homeless as a result of that eviction process. And then you could be another populations who do not qualify under these other populations above, but meet one of the following criteria. You could be families that require services or housing assistance to prevent the return of homelessness, or those who are at the greatest risk of housing instability. As I mentioned, we did conduct a number of stakeholder interviews with the various organizations throughout the city, including shelters, the Housing Authority, support service providers, nonprofit organizations, the continuum of care, the home team members. And so just wanted to provide a little bit of overview on the results of these stakeholder needs. Most every stakeholder indicated that there was there was need for adequate housing at all price points, but especially affordable units are needed for accessibility for persons who may meet the income requirements. There's a definite need for permanent supportive housing, and what is that? It is the wraparound support services to a unit, a housing unit, that helps that person stay housed as opposed to becoming homeless again. There's need for shelter resources for all the qualifying victims, including domestic violence, so need for shelter resources for those homeless shelters across the city. And there's definitely need for wraparound support service needs that would include homelessness and eviction prevention services, housing stabilization services, street outreach services, mental health, substance abuse services, financial literacy, and then parenting, childcare, and life skills. And then there's also an increased capacity need among service providers, so more people in organizations to help provide these services to persons that are in households that are either homeless or at risk of homeless. As I said, we also did a data and gaps and needs analysis based on the actual numbers of persons who are identified as homeless through the shelters, through HMIS data, and through other related HUD and census data. And those numbers told us that there's a significant increase in the unsheltered homelessness across the city. There's a significant increase over the last couple of years in the increase of first-time homelessness in the city. There's a high number of people exiting the system to temporary destinations, so they leave an institution or a shelter, maybe to go to a family's, relative's house, stay on their couch or something, and they have a higher risk of becoming homeless again because they're not going to a housing unit that's permanently supportive housing type of unit. And then 60% of the extremely low-income renters in the city have experienced severe cost burden, which is up over the last 2 or 3 years. As I said earlier on, we did a survey of people with lived experience, and again, as I said, those are people who are currently homeless or at risk of homelessness. 25 persons with lived experience participated in our survey, and 48% indicated that affordable housing was their top priority in the city. Just not enough of affordable housing units to go to for them. 40% of them ranked tenant-based rental assistance, which as their highest priority, so that was another significant need. And interestingly, 56% of them ranked non-congregate shelter as their lowest priority, so there's not really need for additional non-congregate shelters in the city. And then the most cited barriers to housing included income, lack of income, affordability of units, poor quality of units, poor rental history and or arrears, and then landlord-made barriers. And basically what that means is that rents have increased over the last 2 years as a result of the pandemic. Landlords can be more choosy in terms of who they accept for their units, and as a result, it's just causing affordability issues across the city. So after the city carried out its stakeholder process, talked to key stakeholders in the process, after they reviewed the data and gaps and needs analysis, the city proposed the following home ARP budget. And as you can see on the chart, there's several. These are the only eligible activities that are eligible to be used for home ARP. And the city has selected to provide $200,000 for wraparound supportive services for homeless housing or persons who are at risk of homelessness, and the balance of their dollars going to the development of affordable rental housing, almost $2.3 million for that, for the creation of affordable housing units. And again, as you see below, the city's hoping to create at least 8 new affordable rental units, but the hope is that, $3 million is not going to solve the homeless problems in the city of Erie, but they hope that these dollars can leverage additional resources to help create additional units that would benefit for these home ARP type of housing units. And then finally, the city is eligible to take up to 15% of the total grant for administration, and that's really important because there's a lot of ongoing requirements of the city to monitor these projects that get funded, making sure that the units remain affordable for a period of 15 years, carry out subrecipient agreements, monitoring, reporting. That number looks big, but again, keep in mind that these you have to monitor these projects for a minimum of 15 years and at least till 2030. The city has also selected, as is eligible under the Home ARP program, to develop preferences as a result of the needs within the city for types of households that would benefit from these dollars. And the city is proposing preferences for chronically homeless individuals and families, and homeless families with children. Households will be prioritized according to length of time in homelessness, and that is part of our draft plan as well. And then finally, before we get to questions, I just wanted to mention, which I should have up front, that the plan is currently on public display on the city's website. You can take a look at the overall planning process, the data, gaps, and needs analysis, as well as the proposed allocation plan. And so we encourage folks to take a look at that, and you still have time to comment, even if it's not part of this process. You have until, I think, December 9th in order to provide comments to the city. So I think we're going to take a pause here, and if there's any questions, we'd be happy to answer them at this point.
We have no one here to ask questions. I don't believe.
I don't know if anyone's online.
Online?
Yeah.
Do we?
I don't know if
I
anyone's
don't
on
think
Zoom.
so.
Yeah. I asked Frank earlier, just before we started, he said there wasn't then, but
Yeah.
Okay.
so we probably have.
Is there any?
I don't think so.
Do we have anybody online? Are you checking in? Okay. While we're waiting, where I just came from, we were serving dinner to the homeless. I was there from about 3 till just before I came back here. We served dinner from 4 to 5:30. We had to prepare things first. We had about 145 people come in. Yes, and a lot of them, if you see them in the street, they just look normal. Some were not dressed very well or that sort of thing. But that's the second time I've done it. I'm trying to do it once a month now, just to get more in touch with the homeless.
Tanya, if you want to say your piece now, this is the time.
Yes, I would like to, if you don't mind.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry, I don't have a webcam on right now. I just wanted to ask a question. Like, is the city going to build anything where, not a shelter, but something where, like, if a homeless person just needed some other resources, and let's say the shelters were full, and they needed, like, clean clothes or a meal or a shower or something like that, is there any type of backup plan in place, or that's going to maybe go in place or something like that? Because what I was envisioning in my head when I thought about this was, like, how we have roadside rest stops? Can we design something like that for homeless people at different points around the city, maybe?
Do you want me to answer that?
That would have that would have other places for them to go.
Yes, so that is a great idea, and we will take that under consideration, although I'm not sure that that is an eligible activity under Home ARP. These would have to go directly to shelters to kind of increase their capacity and/or ability. But again, the idea would be to provide permanent supportive housing so that people who are currently homeless currently have a place to stay and have the necessary wraparound services to help them stay in that unit so they do not become homeless again. I don't believe that there is any of those types of uses or places around the city. Mayor, I don't know if you or Deborah.
Yeah. I mean, we do serve the homeless Monday through Friday over on the east side. I just came from that. We have about 150 people come in tonight, and they do that every night through the weekdays.
Gotcha, okay. Thank you.
Sure, thank you.
And the other thing I wanted to mention was, I know my friend Leopold was on earlier this morning, and he mentioned something about like income, like with the income-based stuff, it being lowered to match what somebody that's homeless actually has, and make it easier for them to get into homes and apartments and wherever they need to go. Is that something that we're going to be looking at too?
So I think he was talking earlier, the gentleman at this morning's meeting was talking about basic income allocations to households. And unfortunately, that's not an eligible activity under the Home ARP program. But if there's another funding source or a foundation that would come to be able to provide that, that would be an opportunity for that homeless individual to take advantage of that type of source and then potentially reside in a permanent supportive housing unit that would be built or constructed or rehabbed as part of the Home ARP program.
Gotcha. Do you guys think you'll be able to widen the base at all of the funding on this stuff to include different activities?
Right, so the cities can only provide funds to eligible activities under the program, which we just talked about, but the idea would be once this program or this allocation plan is approved by HUD, that the city work with local developers, prepare an RFP so that they're leveraging these dollars to bring more dollars to the table to help provide more units and more services to persons who are homeless or at risk of homeless. That's the idea anyhow.
Gotcha. Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
Sure, thanks for your call.
Thanks for the call.
Yes. That's it?
That's it? Okay, I just have one last chart, which is our next steps and our timeline. So as we mentioned earlier, you can provide comments, will be accepted by Deborah's office through December 9th. As I said, again, the plan is on the city's website for public display and comment, and so if you feel free, just provide comments to Deborah and her office so that we can incorporate them into the plan. It is our intent to propose the draft plan to City Council for adoption on December 21st, and assuming Council adopts it on the 21st, we plan to submit it to HUD on or before December 30th of this year. HUD will then have 45 days to review and approve the city's allocation plan, and once the city approves it, in the first or second quarter of 2023 is when the city can begin implementing its Home ARP plan. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yep.
Did you get that commenter's name? Is it?
Yeah, I thought it was, I couldn't read it very good. I thought it was Trujillo, T-R-E-I-L-O, I think, I-G-L-O.
Okay.
Tanya.
You'll get it.
Yeah. I couldn't read it. Yeah. Thank you all. Thank you. Yeah, no problem.
Thanks, Mayor.
Thanks, Mayor, for coming back. Appreciate it.